You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Break Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Garden. So how do you get yourself to do hard things that you don't have to do? We all want to make big changes, but we often falter with the execution piece. Whether that's changing careers, losing weight, or completing our first triathlon. I think this is the central problem everyone who's ever attempted to start a side hustle faces. You want to do something new, but you don't really have to do it. My friend Kathleen Elkins knows a little bit about this problem. Kathleen's job as a correspondent at Insider, covering investing and the path to financial freedom, is to get the stories behind everyday people who gain financial independence. And to get to that point, you got to do some hard things, whether that's buckling down on debt, starting a side income stream, or investing in real estate without knowing anything about it. Also, Kathleen recently completed her first Ironman triathlon with a friend. Completing an Ironman is a master experience in getting yourself to do really hard things. Since I love Ironman and wanted to have Kathleen on to detail her experience and what she's learned about herself and about the habits of everyday people who put themselves through the race to financial independence, I hope you enjoy this masterclass on embracing the process with the one and only Kathleen Elkins. This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Kathleen, welcome to the break. So happy to catch up with you today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
All right. I'm really excited for this conversation. As I was just telling you, I'm hoping we can really do some good tie-ins. I've got a vision for it. And I usually don't. I usually have just to completely off the cuff stuff. So to tee this all up for our audience, I have a confession. I have followed your writing for a really long time, starting back in like the days when I was doing personal finance blogging and doing startups in that realm. And then you and I had a brief moment of like working together, kind of, sort of, for like a month or so. And we've kept in touch a little bit. But then so you're a writer for Business Insider and you do a darn good job. And I want to ask you a question about that in a minute. But you wrote something a couple months ago where I just was like, I got to talk to Kathleen. So the title of this was, I spent over $5,000 to race an Ironman, which is a triathlon race. I have no regrets whatsoever. And experts suggest it was a good way for me to spend money. I'm an Ironman junkie. I've got my hat on for you today. So we're going to get into that whole story and how we do big things and all of the lessons that you hear and learn from people that you talk to and interview. But let me just start with a softball question, which is, how do you describe what you do currently today?
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. So I am a reporter. I write for Insider, specifically their investing team, and I get to write about the path to financial freedom. So essentially, I interview people who have achieved financial independence or are on their way to achieving financial independence. So I get to talk to people who are very successful and have been very successful with the way that they manage their money and have found creative ways to make money. So it's very inspiring, what I get to do. And then occasionally I get to write about my personal experiences, which I love. And that's the Ironman story is an example of me getting to do that form of writing.
Yeah, and I think that's what had drawn me to your writing from the beginning, is just these profiles, right? Like I love the story of who's the example of someone who did it, who did something different and made it. And you get to do that for a living. So you're just like this knowledge base of all of these amazing stories. And I figured, because you're such a good interviewer, we're going to flip the tables on you and put you on the other side of this. And I think you just told me that it was your first ever podcast experience. So we're going to make it a really good one.
Yes, I'm not used to being on this side of the interview, but I'm down to try it.
All right. So we teed this up a little bit. I followed you for a long time, Ironman, and the tie-in with all of the people achieving kind of their way out, financial independence, retire early, all of that kind of stuff. And the other piece of this that we talk about a lot in my world, and I'm sure you get bits and pieces of in your world, but is this idea of the difference between spending and investing. And so I want to start there actually and ask you if you have a personal definition of that distinction, or if you've come across a good one from the people that you've interviewed.
Totally. And I think I'll just start with this story that we're talking about, which is my Ironman story, because and it's kind of in the headline, but this was not an inexpensive endeavor by any means. Like, one, it's a very physically challenging thing to do, but this also was a very expensive process. And as someone who, I have a running background, but no swimming or cycling background. So I was starting from zero. And so I had to buy all of this equipment. I also had to enter the races, which race fees I learned are extremely expensive, and then cover the travel to get to these races. So it was a massive expense. I think I wrote in my story how it was well over $5,000. But to me, it was more than that. It was an investment in my health. And it was also a way of aligning my spending with my values, which a lot of experts who I've spoken with say, you work hard, you make money. It's important how you choose to spend. And in some cases, how you choose to spend is more important than how much you actually spend. So I'm very conscious with what I do with my money. And I'm not a big foodie. Like, some people love to go to restaurants and that's the experience they want. So I kind of cut back in some of those areas, but I love these crazy experiences like the Ironman or traveling and in this case, I got to travel with one of my best friends. And so That's how I like to spend my money. And again, what you're getting with spending versus investing. This felt like an investment in my health in a way. And so, hopefully that answers that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think, just a couple commonalities there, right? Spending money in alignment with your values. So being clear on what you do value, whether that is experience over material thing. A lot of people invest a lot of money in their home because that's where they're going to be for the majority of their lives, raise kids, do those types of things, and cut back, elsewhere. So I think that's one really important component of that distinction in your mind, is you being clear about what you value and spending in accordance. The other part is then making sure you're not spending in areas that you don't care about. And then I think that another one is, which we talk about a lot in terms of, and I'm sure a lot of people you talk to can relate. An investment is where you have some positive expected return, right? So in sort of financial lingo jargon. So I think where a lot of people get bogged down with, I don't want to buy a course or invest in a property that's scary because I'm spending money, I'm putting it out there. But the reality is, if you continue to do those things and you work hard at it, you have some positive expected return where you're going to be better off in the future, whether that is purely financial or whether it's a skill, investing in a career change or whatever. So I think getting past that distinction and being okay with spending some money in certain areas and allocating your resources correctly for you is a big, big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think that's a great way. When you think of investing, you might just think stock market or real estate. But kind of what we're talking about is there's also this idea of investing in yourself. And I have spoken to a lot of very successful, for example, real estate investors who they spent a lot of money on the front end taking a real estate investing course. And you're not sure what that's going to lead to, but they're betting on themselves and also putting some trust in maybe this course that they choose, but they're putting that upfront time investment and also money investment in the hope that something will come from that. And I think that's a great point. There's more to investing than just putting your money in the stock market. There's also a lot of benefits to investing in yourself.
Right. And I think if you want to work for yourself or retire early or whatever, I tell people that I work with that you need to become an investor in general, because an investor is a resource allocator, and that's what you are doing all the time. You're allocating your time, your money, other people's time, attention, all of this stuff. And you have to figure out what buckets all of those resources go in. And that is fundamentally, at its heart, an investment decision. We're going to get to Ironman. I have so many questions on that. I would like you to take me back to 2021. Okay. Because 2021, I think, is when you sort of switched jobs or you took a break for a little while. Talk to me about what you were doing, why you wanted to take a break, what was going on there.
Yeah, great question. So I've pretty much been doing reporting my entire career. There is kind of a fun early career anecdote that maybe we'll get into. My very first job, which had nothing to do with reporting and actually kind of led to where I am now. But up until 2021, I'd pretty much been doing personal finance reporting for my entire career. And that was kind of all I knew I had other skills, but that was kind of all that I knew how to do. And I got a little burnt out, which I wasn't expecting. And so what I did was, I grew up playing competitive tennis. I played tennis in college. And so actually through writing about a lot of these people who have figured out how to like monetize a skill that they have, I was like, wait, like I do have this skill. I can probably monetize this, and take a little bit of a break from writing. So I took a 9-month, basically like reporting hiatus. I still did some personal writing, and started a blog, about me and my mom, which was very fun. But I taught tennis for 9 months, and I was living in LA at the time, and it's beautiful weather here all the time. You can absolutely make a career out of coaching tennis. And I did that, until I kind of felt like I wanted to get back into the world of reporting, and that led to my working at Insider again. But yeah, I did a kind of a big career pivot, and it was a little bit scary to go from having a salary with health insurance and benefits to working for myself for those 9 months.
What were you hoping to learn or understand or get clarity on in those 9 months?
Yeah, I really wanted the idea of like working for myself and being able to set my own schedule has always been super attractive to me. And again, I write about a lot of these people who are either freelancers or do real estate investing, and they really have control over their schedules. And I loved that idea. And like, I knew I could kind of try it out, and I just kind of wanted to test the waters. And it was, there were pros and cons. And like, ultimately I did decide to go back to reporting. But I think I was really interested in that, the idea of like, oh, like, can I work for myself and can I make this work? And, you never know what's going to happen. Like if I lost my job, it was kind of, it's this reassurance that if I ever do lose my job, oh, like I will be fine. I have some other things that I can do.
Yeah. So it's sort of a learning exploration. Can I do this? What would I do? What's it like? Testing the waters. How did you set yourself up to take that time off? Because a lot of people are sitting here listening to, yeah, I would love to do something like that. I don't have XYZ in place. How did you think through that?
Yes. So I already was teaching tennis on the side. It's always kind of been my side hustle since I was an intern at Business Insider way back when, and making $12 an hour. And I kind of I was living in New York City also. So I needed to supplement the income in some way. So I've always done some sort of coaching on the side or like stringing tennis rackets, something just to supplement the income. So I was already teaching on the weekend. So I already had a little bit of a client base. I also was working part-time at a tennis center. So I kind of already had these things in place, which I think made it a lot easier to make the leap. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and, oh, I need to go out and find like 10 clients. Like I already maybe had like 5 clients and then just grew my roster from there. So it wasn't as scary as it maybe seems because I had done some legwork before.
Yeah. So the supplementing income, I think of that in term that in like managing your runway, right? Like, can you cover your expenses? And what does that look like? Because if you just cold turkey do it and you don't have a plan in place, that just, to me, and I've gone through it, like just as anxiety and pressure that you don't need, that actually can just detract from your focus and getting the most out of your plan and your situation.
I was just going to say, I actually had experience quitting a job before too at that point, which kind of goes back to the beginning of my career.
Yeah, I want to hear
so
it.
I had my very first job was it was right out of college. I remember being a senior in college, and a lot of my friends went the like finance route. And that route, you do internships like sophomore or junior year, and you already know where you're going to be working senior year. I was very different. I was a Spanish major. Like I was not going to be touching econ. So I just remember scrambling, job searching senior year, feeling like I'm never going to find a job. What do I do? And just took the first thing that came my way. And long story short, it was not a great fit for me. And I moved to Boston after college. I was in the city that I didn't know. It was freezing cold. I was really struggling. I would call my mom in tears every day at the end of work. But I didn't think that I had an option. I was like, I'm here for a year at least. Like I'm 22. I can't quit my first job. Like all of my friends are off in like New York City, like these fancy finance jobs. I'm like, I can't just quit my first job. And my mom is the person who gave me permission to quit. She's like, you don't have to do this. Like, I know you have some savings. I know you could teach tennis or nanny or find ways to like get by. Like, you don't have to be in this job that you hate. So that was like, I needed that. I didn't know that at that age. So I did quit after 2 months, which is like crazy thinking back. Like, I still can't believe it. I'm like, I'm 22. Like, who am I to quit my first job 2 months in? But spent 3 months applying to one job a day. And since I had more time in my days, I could really think about like what I wanted to do. And I was like, oh, like I love writing. Oh, I want to be in New York City. That's where all my friends are. So I was very focused during these 3 months, applied to a job a day, pretty much didn't hear back or got denied from everyone until Business Insider actually gave me a chance. But all that is to say, I had this experience early on in my career of quitting, and it worked out. And I worked random side hustles to pay the bills. And I also had some emergency savings. So I think also knowing that I had already done that when I was much younger made it easier to kind of do it again later in my career.
Yeah, even having one experience just makes you so much more confident that you know what's coming, or you know how to manage the risk of the situation. Mm-hmm. That word permission is so interesting. I actually have that word in my LinkedIn bio. The headline, it's like, I think it said something like, when work isn't working, break it. I just gave you permission. Now figure out how to do it. Because I think like when we grow up in a certain way. We have certain ways of thinking, attributes. We see stories. We see, our role models of parents, or whoever does, comes into our view. We just develop how we think about the world. And at 22, it's very remedial. But we don't know anything different. And so we think that's the way it has to be. And there's these moments like that. Permission is one of those that I think is a break moment, where when somebody like your mother gives you permission to quit a job at 22, that's a mind blower. It's like, wow, I got a lot more options here.
It really was. And I'm so thankful for that. Like, I don't know, I might not have landed in this career that I am now. So yes, thank you, Mom.
So speaking of the blog, I think it's called Me and Mama, or Mama and Me.
Mama and Me,
like
yeah,
that,
exactly.
Right? Yeah. So I dug into that, and and it was great because what I got out, like where this is tying in, leading into Ironman, is I came across one of your posts around, this idea that you have unstructured time now. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a scary thing, because how do you get yourself to do something that you don't have to do? And I think a lot of people in the side hustle realm, right? I have a day job, it's paying my bills, but I want to break out of here and want to do something else, have this exact same problem. What did you sort of learn in this period of time about how to get yourself to do things that you technically want to do, but you don't have to do because they're not life-threatening for you at the moment?
Yeah, I think routine was super important for me at this point in my career, because leading up to this, when you're working more of a 9-to-5 job, the routine's kind of built in for you. You wake up at a certain hour, if you want to wake up early to work out before work, if you don't, whatever. But the day is already kind of structured for you. So I was in this really unique situation where there was no structure. And I was like, whoa, what I almost have like too much time. Like it's very exciting, but also a little scary. And like, how do I use that time? So I really tried to build routines. And then I knew that writing, while I wanted to take a break from finance writing, but I knew that I wanted to like continue writing. Like I've always loved writing and I wanted to experiment with a different type of writing. And that's why I started this blog. So I just made like set goals for myself and was like, you're going to do at least one blog post a week. I don't know what it was, but something like that. And no matter what the week looked like, I was going to post that blog. So I think being really intentional with the routines was key. But yeah, it was difficult. And I don't know if I ended up striking the perfect balance by any means. It was kind of a constant evolution and checking in and like, oh, maybe this isn't working so well, so let's adjust here. It's very cyclical, I suppose.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a really like not spending so much time on the plan in terms of what it actually has to be and dot every I and cross every T, but bare bones outline of what you want to try to accomplish. So that's a goal. Maybe it's, 3 KPIs, whatever that may be for the really loose. And then the rest of the time is focused on production and recalibrating. I think that's like, it's that explorer mentality more than plan, execute. So the 3 things that I had from that blog post was 3 learnings that you took out of there were you got to get started every day. Like, because if you don't start that thing, you procrastinate on it, your world fills up with laundry or what, every other thing. So you have to get started. It's got to be like eat the frog first thing, basically, or, it's got to be scheduled in there. You need some sort of plan, even if it's a loose leaf one. So the idea of having goals and deadlines was really big and came out in that. And then the third was sometimes done is just better than good. And that gets to that experimental mindset, the just ship it mindset. We are experimenters here. We're not executing a plan flawlessly. We're here to learn. And so that the iteration and the time component of it is so big. How do you, on the goals and deadlines thing, like I've had a problem with this because I live in an unstructured world, but how do you keep yourself to those things?
Yeah, personally, I'm trying to think back of how I did it before. I'm a very big, I like to write everything down. Like I still don't even really know how to use Google Calendar, and I'm not great at like it's pretty amazing actually that we are here right now on Zoom and the background looks okay.
And you got here.
So I love writing things down. I keep a handheld agenda. I carry it with me everywhere. Like if I lost that, who knows what would happen. And I think to tie it all back, like I make to-do lists. I love the satisfaction of checking something off. So I assume that's kind of what I was doing in that period. Now, I have like very different specific things that I have to do each day for my job. And I actually do a version of that in my Google Doc. Like I have a running Google Doc and each day there's a list of, 4 or 5 tasks. And when I finish it, I'll highlight it in green. It's like, good job. Like you've completed it. But yeah, it sounds so silly and simple, but just the simple act of like crossing something off a list is really satisfying for me. And that helps keep me focused, I guess.
Yeah, I think simplicity makes so much sense. And I think the goal, when you're in this situation, you're taking some time off because you're exploring or you're trying to work up a side hustle. I think the goal has to be consistency. Like the goal has to be the one task that would create an output, not the output itself. Like, I don't think you can, I think people are delusional when they say, okay, I'm going to go in and start a side business and it's going to take me a month and I'm going to replace my income. Like that is a fairy tale. It takes a while and it takes trial and error. And so whatever the thing is that you have to do day in, day out, like that needs to be the goal. That needs to be the one thing that you carve time out for and try to lower those expectations.
Yes. To that point, like I am a perfectionist in a lot of ways. And you can't be, especially with writing. Like I could do a million drafts and it wouldn't ever be perfect. So that was something that was and still is very challenging for me, is like, okay, this is good enough, or this is good enough for today. And like some days I'd go in and have a Google Doc, and honestly, what I would write would not be good, but at least I like started and there was something there, and it wasn't necessarily super important what was on the page, but something was there. And to your first point, like I got started that day.
Yeah. All right. So we got a few tips in terms of generally how to help do hard things when you don't have to do them. Now we're going to get to the crazy part, because you did something that you definitely did not have to do and was really freaking hard. I'm speaking from experience because I've done it myself, so I know. So I got to start with, I need the story of how you decide to actually take on the Ironman when you've never done a triathlon and you don't have any experience in this realm. I know it was partly with your friend, but like, how did you just say like, yeah?
Great question. And I have my friend Linda to thank for all of this, or not to thank, whichever way you see it. It was always her dream. I know her through college tennis. We were on the same team together. It was always her dream to do an Ironman. I did not know this until a year ago. We were running the Boston Marathon together. She lives in Boston. I was living in LA. I went to Boston, stayed with her. And the night before the race, we were watching Ironman YouTube videos to get like amped for the race. I, at this point, had never heard of Ironman, like barely knew what triathlon was. And Linda was like, I've always wanted to do one. Like, would you do it with me? And I'm kind of that person that like, I can't say no to that. Like, this sounds so cool. Like, do I know what an Ironman is? No, but like, yeah, like this is like this really cool, hard sounding thing. Like, let's do it. So that was April of 2022. So we kind of loosely were like, we're going to do an Ironman. We then reconvened in the summer. So June 2022, a year before the race. And we were like, we just need to sign up. We're going to sign up and we're just going to do it. So Linda Googled beginner friendly Ironmans. It did not feel beginner friendly, the one we selected, but apparently it was. We signed up for Austria Ironman, June 2023. And then we officially started training January of 2023. So we had about 6 months to train, and we are the definite, like we were the blind leading the blind. We had zero bike experience, zero swim experience. We both knew how to run, but like we are the type of people who should not have been able to complete this or do this. And we somehow did. And I think that's really cool.
What do you think? So after completing it, what do you think about it now? In terms of this question. So people always come up to me when they hear that I did one and are like, I could never do that. And my view is, actually, after doing it, I think anybody can do it. What do you think, having completed one?
I completely agree. And I will say, I did have the running background, so that helped a lot. But like we went basically, and I will say too, like I knew how to swim. I'd never had a formal swim lesson, but I didn't have to like learn how to not drown, essentially. But I really started from with as little knowledge as one possibly could. And I did do, like, I followed a training program to a T. Like that was very important. I signed up for a 6-month training plan and I barely missed a workout because I was like, if I miss something, I'm not going to be able to finish. So I was very diligent with the workouts. But I think if you don't think of it as a race, it's like, this is just a really long training day and kind of like a fun long training day, because you have all these spectators out on course who are like giving you food and water and like cheering for you, which you never have when you're training. When you think about it that way, it's like, oh, that's not too bad. Like, I'm just going to be out doing activities for like 14 hours, which is, kind of really long, but there's people around me the whole time. Like, when you think about it that way, it's not that bad.
So for people listening, I mean, you've heard me talk about Ironman before probably, but if you don't know, Ironman is a triathlon. It is a 2.4 mile open water swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and then you finish that off with a marathon, and you got to do it in under 17 hours or your time doesn't count. So it's a long thing to prepare for. It's a big challenge. The fact that you guys signed up for this thing and then search for easy or beginner triathlons makes me really chuckle, because I think that's just a funny, like, why? What's the point? And then also, you're in Austria, like you're in the Alps. There's no way that's going to be an easy race.
Yeah, we did not, looking back, it was not the best system. I think it was like a 2-minute Google search that Linda did. She ran it by me. I was like, great, sounds good.
Perfect.
All of a sudden it's June and we're there.
It's so funny. So I had to just chuckle about that.
You're listening to the Break Podcast, powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. I look at Ironman and this challenge as like somewhat of it's very much a parallel for doing anything hard, like changing your job, creating a side business. And I really mean that. And I think, so I'm interested to get your take on this, because I think you mentioned, one, there's just the commitment, right? There's the payment, like I'm paying money. So I feel like I have to, see this through. But having a plan to follow from someone who has done it, or a coach or whatever, is such a key thing, because it's the process that you have to embrace. And so I'm the same thing, we're just bringing it back to like our investment versus spend conversation. It's like, if you can get 6 months, 12 months of learning condensed and a roadmap for what you want to do from someone who's done that, that can make or break like your success rate there. So how did you go about choosing a plan?
Yeah. And I knew that was going to be super important, because having done marathons, it's kind of a similar thing. You pick a plan, whether you make your own or pay for one, or there's free ones online, but it's pretty important to stick to some sort of plan if you want to finish a marathon and not feel terrible at the end. So I knew that was going to be super important. I, in LA, had a lot of friends who were very into triathlon and had done some Ironmans as well. So I went straight to them and I was like, look, this is what I'm doing. What would you recommend? And they got me onto Training Peaks, this app that I'd never heard of. And I bought a 6-month plan. It was like $100, not that bad. And the coach, it was like a virtual coach situation. I couldn't talk to him one-on-one, but like, he created the plan and everything uploaded into my watch and onto the app. And so I would just wake up every day and see what the workout was. And that's what I would do. So it's having it right there was really nice. I didn't have to think about what I was doing. Like, I knew that this very successful coach knew what he was doing, and I put all of my trust in him. And then for what I had to do, and I was very committed to doing every single workout, because this was something I'd never done before. It's not like a marathon where I could like maybe finish without training. I was like, I need to do this or else I likely won't finish. So I did. I was very consistent with it.
Yeah, I was very consistent as well. I think there's a balance where you have to know or trust yourself, I guess, when to push, when to not, because ultimately your goal is to get to the starting line.
Yeah.
When it takes you a year or 6 months or whatever to train, like you have injury, to consider and all that kind of stuff. So I think so what I always told myself was, you're not going to miss a workout, but you don't have to necessarily do the exact workout. So if it was a 10-mile run and I was feeling IT band tightness or something, it might be a modified, like I might go bike for an hour and then run a couple miles or something like that, or just maybe skip the run altogether. But I had to do something, because once you lose that consistency, it's like not starting every day, right? With the side hustle.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. And also what I liked about this Training plan was it was time based, which I'd never done before. Like training for a marathon, it was always mileage based, like, oh, go out and run 15 miles. And I actually loved that because then I could just fit it into my day so much easier. Like, oh, I have a 3-hour bike ride. That's when I'm going to do this. And like at the end of 3 hours, I'm done. It's not like I'm trying to reach a certain mileage. So that was also helpful.
Yeah, I love that because it's, again, it's more the process than the outcome, which is fantastic because like, yeah, if you're thinking about, oh, I have to go 20 miles, you might be pushing too hard because you just want to get it done. But when it's time, it's just like, all right, I'm just going to ride and I can ride slower than I need to. And that's still going to be building the capacity for me. So it's just that like consistency in doing the action thing. If you're going to want to be a writer, write. If it's bad, it's bad. Big deal. Tomorrow's another day. Come back and do it again. Write a page.
Yeah.
The repetition.
Even when you don't want to do it too. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I still cannot say that I like biking. Like every time I got on the bike on the streets of Los Angeles, like I thought that I was going to get hit by a car. Like I hated everything. And I actually got an indoor trainer because I was so afraid of traffic. But like there were a lot of times when I did not want to go on a bike ride, but I was like, have to do it. Just at least start it and then see where it goes.
I want to hear like maybe one of your worst, blockage stories of just not wanting to go out. But mine was, I got up at, it's 5 a.m. going out for a really long bike ride and it was starting to drizzle. And I turned around and I came back to my house and I got off my bike and I was walking back inside because I was like, oh, I'm not going to work. And then I was just like, you can't, I had this conversation in my head, like, you can't do that. Right. And I made myself get right back on the bike and go out. And I did 3 hours in the rain. But it was just like that moment was it was like the turning point because it was like, okay, now you're really invested in it. Now you really, working the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. I can totally relate to that. A lot of mine were like late night swims actually, where it's kind of chilly and it's like you have to get to the pool and then it's always freezing right before you jump in the pool. And like the first couple laps are also really cold. So that was always, the way it worked here was you could reserve a lane for a certain hour. And some days I would just like keep pushing it back. And the latest time I could do is 8 p.m. And it was really hard to get out for some of those evening swims.
Yeah, especially if it's like your second workout of the day when you've already, feels like you've already checked that box and you got to go back for it again. So you say yes to this and you've never really done it before. Did you have buyer's remorse like right away?
I mean, it didn't really hit me until we signed up for a practice half Ironman in April. And when I say practice, it was like a practice because we had never done a triathlon. So we needed to know how transitions worked. And it really didn't hit me what we had signed up to do until that race. And it's like, oh, like, what do we do? Like, we have not only like this was our choice to do this. Like we are paying a lot of like, what am I doing? But it did take a while for it to kind of hit because there is like a little bit of a barrier between you and the event because it's so far away. It's like, oh yeah, like we'll be fine by the time it comes along. So maybe not immediate buyer's remorse, but definitely started to question the decision the closer I got to race.
Had you done a bunch of open water swimming before that?
Oh no. The half Ironman in April was both mine and Linda's first open water swims. It was terrifying. It was in the ocean and you jump off a dock and which was also scary. I was like, are my goggles going to fall off? Like what is the volunteers tap you on the back and you jump into the ocean. And all of a sudden it's just, you can't see anything. It's not the pool. I've gotten all nice and cozy in the pool. You can see the bottom. It's not salt water. You are in the open ocean. You've got so many people around you. You can't see anything. There's salt water coming into your mouth. Like I just felt like I was flailing for the first like 10, 15 minutes and could not believe what I had done. But at that, you can't turn around. So I just kind of like tried to control my breathing and was like, just keep going forward and just try to get out of the water. So yeah, zero open water swimming experience.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I asked because like that is the most shocking part of it. I think everybody is like, well, maybe I could bike and maybe I could do the run. I could shuffle through the run, but man, I can't do the open water swim. There's no way. Like that seems way too hard. And what I said my experience is that It's actually not. But what you have to overcome is your fear of being around people that are like flailing and kicking and doing all sorts of stuff. And I got a bunch of stories about what happened to me. But like once you do that, and if you can calm yourself down and just stroke it out and go forward, swim's like maybe 1/10 of the race in terms of time. So it's not that bad at all. But it's all a mental exercise of just being calm in the water while chaos is going around around you.
It's completely mental. And it really took me a while to settle in. I was definitely panicking. But yeah, it's just like in the moment you're there, you can't turn around. And so I think like having played competitive tennis probably helped a little bit. But yeah, it just like I went back to my breath and it was like just try to take deep breaths and then you kind of settle in and you're like, okay. This isn't too bad.
How do you take deep breaths when you're swimming underwater? So that was it. You just went to your breath. You just went to, did you lay on your back and float for a while, or did you do anything else to just slow down?
I think I did some like breaststrokes. Yeah. Another tricky thing is like sighting. So in the pool, you just know how to go straight. In the open water, you have to be constantly looking up for like buoys or other people swimming to go the right way. And I was not great at that. So I think I took a couple breaks to like breaststroke and like make sure I was oriented in the right way. But yeah, honestly, I might not have really ever been too relaxed for all of the swim. Now that I think about it, but you just kind of, like you said, it's maybe 1/10 of the race. You forget about the swim by the time you're halfway through the bike.
Right. You're like, now my legs hurt. So my experience was in Lake Michigan doing my first open water swim. And we had like huge swells and white caps and, didn't understand pacing. And I went like straight out into the white caps and take the first turn and completely gassed. Like I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm gonna make it out of the water. And then 2, if I do, like I feel like I'm just spent. How am I gonna make it through the rest of the race? They had boats coming. They pulled 100 people out of the water that day. It was brutal, but like you, I mean, it was just sort of, it's breaking it down in your mind. Like, okay, get to the next buoy. Get to the next buoy, take a breath, calm yourself down. And that experience helped me so much. Like it was so scary at the time, but it helped me so much going into then to do other Ironman events because that's where I developed like, oh, well, once that happened to me, the rest of it was easy. I had that experience now of what that feels like. And now I know how to go about doing that. Just like you had your experience of quitting your job.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That was scary, but got through it.
And I think if I could go back and do anything differently, I think it was a really bad idea to not do any open water swimming before the race. Yeah. Like, thank goodness we had the practice half Ironman. Because like you said, like it's the more you do it, the more comfortable it's going to get. And even by the time we did the full Ironman, even just having a couple open water experiences helped a ton. But yeah, it's just like working that muscle. And for me, the swimming was more mental than physical. So like doing some open water swims in LA and just like every time it got a little bit easier. And it just, that requires just like putting in the time and just forcing yourself.
Do you have a good, like just horrible training story? Like, is there a day that just stands out in your mind that was just god awful?
Yeah. I have a lot, actually. Okay. I have a lot of like bike crashes early on. And
really?
Sound bad, but because on a road bike, like, this is obvious for you, but like you clip into the bike. I'd never done that before. I'd never been on a road bike. Like I had to get the shoes and the pedals and the cleats, and I could not figure out how to clip in and out of my bike. It took so long, and it was awful. For the first month, I would just fall all the time because there's a lot of like busy paths in LA. And so like you have to slow down when pedestrians are coming. And I would be like trying to unclip and then just like topple over. And actually my very first time clipped in, I crashed into the back of my friend's bike and like slightly damaged his bike. So there were the bike was probably the biggest learning curve. Also learning how to dress properly on the bike. Like biking in 50-degree weather is very different from running in 50-degree weather. And I had some really miserably cold bike rides, including one where I got so cold. I was really I couldn't feel my hands or my feet. Mentally, I was checked out. And I had driven my car to where I was planning on starting and finishing the ride. And I couldn't find my car at the end of the ride. And I was panicking for a couple minutes. And then I realized my watch had like a map of where I started. So that's how I found my car. But yeah, there were a lot of tough training days for sure.
Yeah, it's the crashes at 0 miles an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Unclip. I know those well. I've definitely had that happen to me before as well. That's really funny. Did you have any experiences with bonking where you expend so much energy, you lose so much salt out of your body that you're kind of in another world?
Yeah. I think the closest I came to bonking, actually, Linda was in LA with me this one week. We planned like a training trip together and we were trying to do a 100-mile ride. It would have been our first century. And it was a really hot day. We'd been out there for like 8 hours or something. And we were only 90 miles in. And we had the option, we were like at the car, we had the option to extend like 5 miles there, 5 miles back to make it. And we were both just like, I don't think that's a good idea. So that was probably the closest I got / bonked there. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a small experience with it. 115 miles on the bike, hot day. And then I had to go out and do a run. It was one of the, kind of one of those brick workouts. And I got home and I'm wobbling around the house. My wife is like, you can't go anywhere.
Well, at least you did your run. We were supposed to do a run after that ride and we were like, we can't.
Yeah.
We just ate a bag of chips.
Yeah. You got to get the salt in.
Exactly.
I mean, it's funny that the funniest description I've heard of Ironman is a bike race with a swim warm up, a marathon cool down, wrapped in an eating contest is basically how I've had it explained. So
good.
It's pretty good. Yeah. All right. I want to get to the day. So you said you've got, or at least in that article, it said no regrets from doing all this. You spent over $5,000. You trained for at least 6 months. You put in a ton of blood, sweat, and tears, traveled, and you had no regrets. Talk to me about the day. Did you have any goals? What was your mindset going into the day? What were you trying to achieve? How did it go?
Yep. No regrets. And I'll add to that, would do it again.
Okay.
Which is kind of crazy. But yes, the day, the mindset / the goal was just to finish, which was actually really I've done a bunch of marathons and pretty much my mindset going into each marathon is I want a PR. Like I want to run faster than I ever have in this distance. But with this race, it was like, no, you're just trying to get to the finish line. So it kind of like automatically took this pressure off in a way, which was really nice because I am just not used to entering a race with that mindset.
Right.
And then kind of back to something I said before, it was like, this is just a long, fun training day. And I think so the race we chose in Austria, it's a really small town and it kind of felt like the Ironman is kind of like their Super Bowl. Like there's not a ton maybe going on in this town and everyone comes out on Ironman day. So the streets were just lined with spectators and fans. And in addition to them, like you're surrounded by all these other athletes doing this really hard thing. And it's really inspiring and it's very emotional and everyone's very supportive because you're not competing. Like I'm not an elite. I'm not like up at the front competing. Right. Like everyone's kind of working together to get to the finish line. And at like a very low moment during the run, I was running with someone who had completed several Ironmans and he was like, you're going to get through it. Just like run behind me, like follow my feet. It's going to be fine. And like that, like, of course, like I'm not going to drop out. Like when you have someone like encouraging you like that. So it was a overwhelmingly positive experience and positive day. I also got very lucky because I finished right before it got dark, which I think could have things could have gone in a tough direction had I been out there like too much longer. But very, very emotional day, a lot of tears at the finish line, very positive experience. And then like just coupled with the fact that I'm in Austria with one of my best friends, like again, going back to the like spending in alignment with your values. Like I love travel and I love adventure and I value my friendships, and like this molded together so many things that are important to me. And it was just, it almost, I guess a good way of summing it up, the day itself felt like a celebration of all of this hard work that we had done. Like for 6 months, we'd been training consistently. And it was like, okay, like today we get to like go out and like do this thing. And so it was very satisfying.
It's a very surprisingly emotional day for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think it holds a special place in my heart because I was always a outcome driven person. And I think training for Ironman and learning how to really, you have to embrace the process. There is no other way. You have to embrace the process. I think that was the the event or moment that it completely changed my perspective on a lot of things. Like, yeah, it like the it's cliche, like the journey's the destination or whatever, however that's said. I can't remember. I'm gonna butcher it. But that idea is I don't think I fully recognized until I went through Ironman.
Yeah.
And I found myself doing things like you. Like the goal wasn't, I didn't go to the start line with a time in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I had a 3-tier system. Number one was enjoy the day.
Mm-hmm.
Like don't do anything stupid. Don't push it. Have a smile on your face. Like be able to enjoy that day. If things were good and I felt good, I was hoping to finish at a certain time. And if weather was completely perfect, I'd try to shoot for, the time in mind. But I was training the whole time with a watch, logging every single mile I did. I took my watch off. I didn't even use it for the race because I was like, I don't want to watch this. I don't care. I just want to be here and be with the race. And so that is like, it really did have a profound effect on how I view taking on challenges. Like you have to embrace that process or you really have zero, you got zero chance of enjoying it basically.
Yeah. I love that you put your watch aside because then you're just automatically a little more present also.
Yeah.
And then just like going into it knowing, okay, there are definitely going to be some times that suck. Like we know this is a very hard kind of crazy thing to do. So I think having never done it, we didn't know like how much it was going to hurt at times, but going in knowing this is a challenging thing, there are going to be low points, just like try to get through those as well as you can and then keep moving forward. Like, I think that helped having that. I set a really low expectation. Like there are going to be times when you're like going to want to quit, which luckily didn't get to that point, but.
Did you guys run together or were you separate? How did that work?
So our plan was at the transition zones, if anyone had to wait longer than 10 minutes for the other person, just to go if you were feeling good. So Linda came out of the water about 5 minutes ahead of me and was waiting at transition 1. And so we were able to start the bike together, which was awesome. And we had this like great photo of us starting. This was like when we were still like all smiles because we haven't started really the race yet. We've got this great photo of us leading transition together. And we biked for about the first 60 miles kind of together because there's the drafting rules and we were really nervous because again, we're very beginner and we're like, we don't want to get any, they literally will give out like penalty cards if you're too close to someone. So we would take turns. One person would be like ahead of the other person for 30 minutes and then the other person would swap and just like check in. And we did that for about 60 miles. And then at some point I was out ahead and Linda just never came around. So I finished the bike a little bit before her, waited the 10 minutes, and then started the run without her. But because of the way the course is set up, you got to like pass people all the time. So we actually saw each other on the run and like we're able to cheer for each other. Another fun thing that we did, this is like one of my favorite things that we did. If you're ever doing this with a buddy, they had the like, I don't know what they call it, like personal needs bags, maybe
Yeah.
that you get to fill with like whatever you want. And like it's on the bike course and on the run course. And I think people put like fuel in there or like maybe another pair of like socks if they want to change socks or whatever. We wrote like notes to each other, like little inspirational notes. And so at mile 16 of the run, that's where our bags were. So I like ran over and grabbed my bag. I didn't get anything in it besides like little note and like walked for a while and like read it. And that like it was a good push for the last 10 miles.
I think this was was this the full Ironman or the half Ironman? The story of the guy who was running in front of you. Was that?
Oh, yes, that was the full Ironman.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. What mile was this? How were you feeling? What were you feeling like?
Yes, this is actually a pretty funny story because on the bike course, and again, like very beginner biker, probably one of the last people to finish biking. There weren't too many people out on the course when I was out on the bike course, but on the uphills, I kept passing, and you can see people's like bibs and like their name and their flag, where they're from. And I would pass this American named Cody, I think was his name, on the uphills, and he was like walking his bike on the uphills. And then we'd get to a downhill and he'd fly by me. And in my head, I'm like, who's this like silly American who can't like pace himself, like can't do the uphills, da, da, da. So it turns out, this is who I ran into on the run later. He was like, and he came up to me because he saw my bib, was like, oh, Kathleen, like we were like flip-flopping on the bike. And I was like, yeah. And he told me that his shifters broke. So he was stuck in like a really hard gear and was forced to walk he was like a very, very accomplished Ironman and like much fitter than me. But here I was thinking he was like, couldn't pace himself. And meanwhile, he's like, physically can't go up this hill because his gear is stuck in like some, whatever. So ran into him on the run around mile 15, which is about when I started to feel really crappy. And we kind of started talking. The interesting thing is like, I felt like I could talk okay, like I could hold a conversation, but my body was just so confused and like, what is going on? And like everything hurt and my legs felt so heavy. And we just chatted for a couple miles. And then at one point I was like, I don't know if I can really like talk that much more, like I need to focus. And that's when he was like, you know what? Just like, I'm going to run a little bit ahead, just like watch my feet. Like we're going to get to the finish line. And we ran for about like 5 miles together. And then I did the last 6 on my own, but I like needed that moment.
I love the just watch my feet. Like that's so simple. And when you're in that dark place, this goes for anything. Like when you're in that low, dark place, you just have to get to simplicity. I remember the first time I trained for Chicago Marathon, first time I ever did like a 4-hour run. My version of that was get to the next crack in the sidewalk. I was on Lakeshore Drive and going up and down. I was like, next crack, next crack, next crack. I think that's so key. And then thinking about when I've been low in career land, right? Or not knowing what I was going to do next, or just been feeling defeated. Like you just get back to whatever that simple, basic thing is that propels you forward, right? That if you keep doing that consistently, you will get to where you go. If you just walk and put one foot in front of the other, you're ultimately going to get to where you want to go, even if it's a 1,000-mile journey, right? The 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. So I think that simplicity aspect of it is so interesting. That's just such a good story about the camaraderie of that whole event and how everybody's pulling for each other.
It really was amazing. And like marathons are special in their own way, but this was like nothing I had ever experienced. And like at the finish, it's like a huge party and they announce your name over the loudspeaker. They say something like, you are an Ironman, and they say your name. And it's so emotional. It's really hard to describe like until you're in the moment. And I was like finishing and like trying to smile like for the cameras, but at the same time like sobbing like out of like just all this emotion. And so it's kind of funny. My photos are like sob smiling.
My photos are terrible because I cramped up. I cramped up my hamstring right as I'm crossing the finish line. So I'm like this, holding my hamstring. It's pretty funny. What did you learn about yourself in this whole experience? And is there something that has affected the way that you're carrying yourself forward and everything that you do, or anything specific that you do?
I think it was such a good reminder to like switch things up every once in a while, challenge yourself, get outside of your like normal, whatever day-to-day stuff you do. Cause like, again, all I do for exercise is run. And like, that's my comfort zone. And like, I've been running since like 6th grade when I signed up for cross country. And it's just like a very easy thing for me to do. I put on my shoes and I like go out the door and I know kind of the routes to do and whatnot. And like, even going to a marathon, I'm like, I have experience with that process. And like, I'm comfortable, like going to the expo, going to the start line, I know what to do. This was all completely new. Like it was learning 2 brand new sports, and then even traveling to the like event itself is like, you feel kind of out of place. And like, and thank goodness I had Linda there. Like I would never be able to do this without a buddy, I don't think. But like, and there were definitely points where I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I hate swimming in the ocean. I hate biking outside. It doesn't feel safe. But I'm so glad. And again, me and biking right now, like relationship is not great. Me and swimming, I love the pool. Like I never would have, like, I didn't even know how to put on a swim cap before this. Like, I didn't even know you were supposed to wear a swim cap in the pool. And like I had to learn what circle swim is. And like, if there's more than 3 people in the lane, you have to like circle with them. And so there were all these things in the beginning where I was like, I feel so out of place. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then like by the end of training, I'm like bringing friends to the pool and like teaching them how to circle swim and like handing out swim caps. So it's like this very fun, yeah, it kind of sucks in the beginning. And like, it can be like very uncomfortable, like doing something that's so new. But then like, I guess like not only seeing improvement, but like gaining that confidence in something new was really cool. And I just never would have done that. Like, I just would have kept doing like, oh, like I run marathons, so I'm going to sign up for a marathon. So I guess like to sum it up, it was a good reminder that like, oh, step outside the comfort zone every once in a while. You never know what might come of it.
Get back to that learning mentality, right? Like as adults, I feel like we're almost conditioned to have to project ourselves as experts for whatever, like in our jobs and all that kind of thing. And we end up like sort of shying away from new things because we feel that like, oh, well, I don't know how to do that. For some reason, like the physical things, I've always had an easier time stepping out of the comfort zone. And I'm trying to take more of that into the realm of work and creativity. And saying, you know what, this is my opportunity to learn something new. And there's just something about hard things too, that like that's the emotional part of it. It's so hard that when you can't help but be overcome with emotion. And that's the feeling that I want for a lot of our listeners who want to step out, who wish to step out of their comfort zone and take on a challenge like that. Not physically, but in the realm of work and figuring out who they want to be. Like I want that feeling for them. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I think there's so many amazing parallels there.
Yeah. And I feel like it's this like combination of like self-belief and like having like enough confidence to be like, okay, I'm going to make this leap, but then also pairing that with like preparation. Cause again, like kind of back to like me and quitting my jobs. Like it's, I didn't just quit and have like nothing lined up or no expectation of like what would happen when I quit. It's like that combination of like preparing yourself to do it, but then also like taking the leap, which is a very hard thing to do, even if you are very prepared, like you do. And I think that comes from is like this kind of like self-belief, or sometimes even like for me, like in terms of the Ironman, like why did I think this was something I could do? Like that's like, where did that even come from? Like, it's almost like delusional. But I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do it. So it is, kind of a combo there, I guess.
Yeah. I think the moral of the story is you need both. You need delusion and you need the logic part of it. And looking back then, like you can accomplish some crazy stuff that you never thought you could do. I mean, I can remember getting in the pool for the first time and not being able to swim 100 yards without being absolutely gassed. And then, a few months later, I'm going almost 2.5 miles in a lake, it's simply amazing. And it's the same thing. Like you want to start your freelance business. You need to be stupid enough to say yes to that you can do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can, but you don't know it yet. And then you need to go and figure out the exact steps that you need to take from someone who's been there and done that before. And thankfully, there's a lot more people that have done a freelance business or a side hustle than there are people that have done Ironman. So there's plenty of people out there that can help you through that.
Totally.
I've got just some sort of more random
Mhm.
rapid fire type questions coming up, and some from the audience. Do you have a favorite story of somebody that you have interviewed that maybe parallels our Ironman story, or just a good story about somebody who's overcome the odds and broken free?
Yeah. There are so many inspiring stories. Like it's going to be very hard for me to choose one, but I'm going to pick one that's kind of like top of mind because it was a recent story. And that's actually one of my favorite parts about my job is like hearing some of these stories. And it is very inspiring. But I recently talked to this real estate investor. Her name is Ziana, and she was always interested in real estate, but she didn't have like any savings, and she was actually finishing up massage therapy school. And she like didn't have consistent income because she was doing like a little bit of like massage work on the side, but she wasn't exactly financially in a position to buy a property. And she like understood that. She's like, I don't have savings for a down payment. I don't even have consistent income. So like, how am I going to get a mortgage? But she wasn't like, oh, it's just not for me. She was like, what am I going to do to like make this happen for me? And so she started with what she already had, which was a 2-bedroom apartment in Boulder, Colorado, where she was living. And she was like, I can just rent out my second room on Airbnb. And she kind of got started in this like it didn't require any upfront costs because it was already furnished. And she starts renting out this apartment and it's going really well. And she's like, oh, I should do this with like another apartment, because she still doesn't have money to like buy a place. But she's like, maybe I can do this with another place. And she borrowed like $4,000 from her dad, which was enough to sign a lease on a second apartment and furnish it. And she starts renting out those 2 rooms on Airbnb, and she's really kind of crushing it. And she ends up saving enough money to buy her first like real property, which was a very small, like 1-bedroom condo in Boulder. And she kind of kept doing like taking these very little steps. And even when she bought that first place, she couldn't get a mortgage because again, she didn't have like a traditional job. So she went through a private money lender. And this was actually one of her previous landlords who did private money lending. So she like worked out terms with him and got a loan from him. But I just loved like her approach to everything, which was, and kind of actually now that I think about it, like relates to some of the things we've already said, but like very small baby steps. And then just the mindset of like, she was never like, oh, this isn't for me. I can't do real estate investing. It's like, what can I do with what I have? And now she owns like 9 properties in Colorado. She's financially independent from her rental income. Like all of her rental income covers her day-to-day expenses and then some. And so I really like that story.
Yeah. Break it down, do what you can, get the smallest chunk that moves you forward. I mean, it's a great story.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Is there a recent author, thought leader, or influencer that you've come across that has caught your attention?
Ooh, great question. I'm trying to think of what I'm reading right now is, I don't know if this answers the question at all, but I'm reading The Overstory, which I've heard great things about. I like to read really good literature because I'm always trying to improve my writing, and my finance writing, it's very like structured, and there's not like a ton of room for creativity, which is why I kind of like to blog on the side. So I'm always trying to read like very good literature and pick up I don't know, writing style tips. That's the first. And then, kind of related, but not really. My podcast of choice is called That Triathlon Life, which is what got me through training. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like other mediums. That's the best that I have right now.
Perfect. Who's the most famous person you've interviewed?
Ooh. When I was at CNBC, we got some big names. Like we had Barbara Corcoran. For the fitness enthusiasts, like David Goggins.
Okay.
Yeah, we had some like Mark Cuban. Oh, for me as a tennis player, we got Venus Williams.
Nice.
In the studio, and I got to do the interview. So that was like, I was starstruck.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Refresh my memory. When you were at CNBC, you kind of created or started the Make It series, right? So if anybody, is that correct?
So there were three of us. Yes, exactly. It was basically me, one other reporter, and an editor. And it wasn't like my idea by any means, but I was a part of like the very tiny team that brought it to life, which was super cool. Yeah.
So if our listeners if any of our listeners have read those stories, which I always read at CNBC, you can thank Kathleen for that. So I always ask this question, there's a lot of negativity in the world. You get to see a lot of positive stuff, but what's got you really excited about the next 12 months, either personally or just society at large? Just give us the dose of positivity.
Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind, which is more of a personal thing, is I'm moving across the country to New York to be closer to my family, who's all on the East Coast. And I think that any sort of transition can be really exciting. Like, obviously it can be a little bit scary, and it means like new home and new routines. But I think transition is like this really exciting time to like start a new routine and like learn a new neighborhood. And so I'm actually very excited about that. And I would encourage people to think of transitions as like these great opportunities, I guess.
Very cool. Love that. Got a couple questions from our audience.
Ooh.
Who has been your most influential professional mentor?
I have to go with one of my first editors when I was an intern at Business Insider, because I had zero journalism experience. Her name is Libby Kane, and she kind of just taught me everything I needed to know about how to be a good finance reporter. And yeah, they did not have to hire me, and they did. And I was very lucky to, yeah.
You were lucky after quitting your job, your first job in 2 months, and they still took a pass at you. They must have seen something special.
Yeah, I still don't know to this day how that happened.
All right. One reader stumbled upon Mama and Me series, and she wants to know what the biggest lessons are you've learned from your mom in general or through your mom as an entrepreneur.
I think as an entrepreneur, one really cool thing about my mom is she started her business in her 50s. So it's never too late to start a business or lead a more entrepreneurial life. And it took her a while to get off the ground, but she's crushing it right now.
Okay, great. I would add permission to that too. That's a huge word. And I think people need to reflect more on that word and the ways it serves you in your life. I think just anybody giving you permission to do something new and encourage you is super powerful. And she did that for you for sure.
Yes. Thank you for adding that.
All right. So you talk to a lot of people in real estate. So I got a few real estate questions. Is real estate investing recession proof? I don't know if you're able to answer that or not, but that's a question here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the investors I talk to really believe it is. I mean, in a market like right now, which is not the easiest market to invest in, I talk to a lot of people who are still buying properties right now. It's just a little harder to find the right deal. But kind of their belief is like, if I buy the right property, it's likely going to appreciate in value over time. Like, these are people who are buying and holding. They're not buying and flipping. So they're in it for the long run. And as long as they can it's a very vague term of like make the numbers work, but like as long as they can make the numbers work, meaning a lot of these properties are rental properties. So they're making sure they're figuring out how much are my housing expenses going to be each month, and can I make that back and then some in rental income. And as long as it's positive, like, and they're generating cash flow and there's a good chance that it's going to appreciate in value over time. I think, all the investors I've spoken to like really believe it is a recession-proof strategy.
You talk to a lot of people that do Airbnb stuff. Is that model here to stay? Because I've seen a couple things, locally where their communities are pushing back sometimes. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, there's like the Airbnb bust term out there. So from what I understand and from who I've spoken with, it's not necessarily dying. Like you can still make money this way, but it's not necessarily as easy as it used to be. Like you can't just throw up photos on Airbnb and list a space and expect to get bookings. So the people who I've spoken to recently who are really crushing it and succeeding, they're just like going above and beyond. So one person who comes to mind, this investor is really cool. I wrote a couple stories on him. His name is Kent, and he invests in Airbnb properties in Scottsdale, Arizona. And he specifically designs bachelorette-themed Airbnbs. And he did all this research and he found out that a lot of girls' trips and bachelorette parties, they're very prevalent in Scottsdale. And he has 2 Airbnb properties there, and they're decked out with like Pelotons and like a pool. And he makes it like the guests who he has, he makes it very easy for them to plan their trips. He gives recommendations to restaurants that take big parties. Anyways, he's gone really above and beyond. And also his listings are beautiful. And like, this is the type of person who's doing really well. So I think to sum it up, it's still possible to make money. It's maybe a little bit harder, and it's definitely like the least passive form of making income, I would say, through real estate. Like in general, long-term tenants, you have them hopefully coming in for like a year or more and not having to answer too many questions to them. A short-term tenant, like you're on call at all time. Like if something's wrong with the Airbnb at 9 p.m. on a Friday, like you're the one who they're calling. So it's maybe a little bit harder to make money that way, but I don't think it's completely dying.
Another kind of last real estate question. Is it for everyone, or are there situations that are like kind of clear no's?
It's definitely not for everyone. And I'm saying this based on interviews that I've done. It's very time consuming, especially at the beginning. And I think you just really have to like want it and like be willing to put in the time. Like a lot of things that these successful investors say is like, it's not necessarily hard. Like the steps aren't hard, but it does take time. And it does take creativity. And a lot of people I talk to are people who, again, they don't start with like a ton, like a lump sum of cash. They're like having to come up with creative financing strategies to make this work. So I think you really have to be like, these are the people who are looking at listings every single day. Like this is what they love. Like they know their market like inside and out. So I think if you're like really into it and it excites you, go for it. But if not, it might not be, because it's a lot of work. And I think a lot of people think like, oh, real estate investing like passive. But it's especially in the beginning, not as passive as people may think.
Outside of real estate, is there another really prevalent path to passive income or financial independence, or however you want to classify that, that's sticking out to you?
Yeah, I guess and mostly I'm talking to real estate investors. The one thing that comes up over and over is just the people who are doing very well and either like retired early or on track to retiring early, and a lot of them have standard 9-to-5 jobs, but they have multiple streams of income. So these people are focusing on earning more, and which is really interesting concept to me, because like I was someone who grew up, I was taught like the importance of saving money, which is very important. And these people are very good savers. But the thing that they always emphasize is like you can only save so much, like figure out ways to build your income streams. And like, I guess some examples, a lot of people are like leveraging social media, starting like, I guess, I don't know. I don't know how to get more detail on that, but leveraging social media, real estate, obviously. There's also just like part-time jobs. A lot of times people will, you could drive for Uber, or what we just wrote a story on Insider about this couple that, earned $35,000 last year walking dogs on Rover, and like they love dogs. So there's just like all of these ways that you can make money in addition to, and if you have a 9 to 5, other advice, which is like seems very obvious, they're like, oh, just like see if you could ask for a raise. But I think the big like takeaway for me has been like, oh, how can I like increase my earning? Because the most successful people, they've got multiple streams of revenue.
Very interesting. Yeah. That diversification is important. You run into these resource allocation decisions, which is to kind of bring it all back to the beginning of our conversation, the skill of thinking like an investor or thinking like a poker player, gambler, like making decisions where you have to allocate resources and you don't know the exact outcome. Taking a portfolio approach to your life. Like these are skills that I think are important, not just for earning more money, but creating a dynamic, resilient life.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk about these types of things all the time. Creator economy, freelancing, being a consultant on the side, doing all sorts of things to get more joy out of your life, more juice out of your talents, your natural talents. And then, being able to do what you want, whether that's retire or travel or do Ironmans all over the world.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add, just because it never came up, but like I talk to a lot of people who just do very like boring index fund investing. And like, if you have a long time horizon and like there's nothing like that's a very passive way of like letting your money grow. So I do like to mention that because I often talk to real estate investors and people who are like making money on YouTube and like Instagram, but like also anyone can invest in like a low cost index fund. It's going to grow over the long run. And again, it's not like the most exciting thing, but it also works. And I do talk to a lot of people who have built wealth just through smart stock market investing. Yeah.
And you get those stories of the janitor who, retires and gives $10 million to the school because he owned Berkshire Hathaway stock for 40 years or whatever. Yes. I mean, again, boring, but man, whatever gets you there,
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. Since you're often the interviewer, is there anything I missed? Is there a question that I should have asked you in my time that I didn't? That's
the question that I always ask at the end of my interviews. I said, is there anything else you wanted to mention that I did not ask? So yeah, great final question, but I think you pretty much covered everything.
I'm pretty sure I probably picked that up from you along the way.
This is a question for you. Yeah. Do you have another Ironman that you're preparing for?
That is a great question. I was actually gonna ask you about this as well. So I always said it is absolutely something that I want to do again. I have 3 kids. I'm in the thick of it with them right now. They're like, my youngest is 6. So it feels impossible. It feels like it's a long way away, but I wouldn't count me out. I would love to do another one. I did the one here. So I live in Madison, Wisconsin. I did the one here. It's a fantastic event, small town, smaller town through the college and campus and all that kind of stuff. I would certainly do this one again, or, perhaps travel to another one. I don't have a timeline, but maybe we can figure out how to do it together.
Yes. Love it. Yes, I like that. Cool. Don't count me out. And also, you see people finishing Ironmans in their 70s, 80s. Like, we've got time.
We do have time. That's for sure. Yep. I totally agree. And I go down and watch it every year as a spectator because it's just amazing. So, all right. Tell us where we can find more about you online and follow your work and everything that you're up to.
Yeah. If you, search my name and Insider, a list of all my stories will pop up. Unfortunately, my team writes behind the paywall. So that's kind of a bummer but who knows? Maybe you'll consider it an investment in yourself. But yeah, so that's where all my stories are. I try to post snippets on LinkedIn as often as possible. I don't really use Twitter. I am on Instagram, but yeah. Maybe this is good. I'll try to post more stuff on LinkedIn. I kind of got out of that habit.
Yeah. Well, that's where I caught the story, I think, initially. Mm-hmm. And we'll make sure we have all these links in our show notes page so everybody can follow your great writing, great stories. I mean, it's so great and refreshing to see, regular people making their dreams come true, which is amazing. So thank you so much for being here. Best of luck with your move and transition. If you come through Madison, Wisconsin and want to watch the Ironman in September or anything like that, let me know. Yeah. I'd be happy to host you because I'll be out there cheering everybody on. But until then, thanks so much for being here and great to catch up with you. This
was super fun. Yeah.
Awesome.
First podcast.
Yeah, check. Cross it off the list.
Like sweating, but like harder than the Ironman. All right, bye.